Hi. I've been experiencing a lot of anxiety in my life. I think just there have been a lot of changes happening in the past year, and so I don't really know how to deal with all of them, and I don't really know who I can talk to either. So I thought it'd be best to come to a mental health counselor.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in today. I didn't introduce myself before. My name is Melissa. I'll be your therapist. And what's your name?
My name is Reagan.
It's nice to meet you. So you were talking a little bit about anxiety. And just like if you can clarify if I don't have it correctly, you're living at home, and that's creating a lot of anxiety for you.
Yeah, I during COVID I came back home, and so I've had other changes too, just with my job, and then yeah, moving back home, living with my family again. All of that has brought up a lot of anxiety I didn't have before. I think just all the changes um, have made it tough to adjust to the new way of life and like going from having been independent, living away from home, and now coming back home. Um, yeah, all those changes have been a little tough.
So how has that been like for you? Like you said, you were feeling independent, and now it's just like you're back to how you were before.
Yeah. When I was away, it was nice because I just could make all of the decisions that I wanted and whatever was best for me in the moment. So I had my work schedule and my personal life, social life, um, and I didn't have to think about other people, I guess, in a sense. And so, or not in like my daily life. So now coming back, I really have to adjust my social life and my personal life and like the boundaries with my family now that like I'm an adult living at home and not a kid living at home. It makes it really different, and so I think for me, but then also my family, like it's just those changes that have been brought by me coming back have like just changed things up in like a new way, and so yeah, part of it's like independence and part of it's like boundaries now with my family.
When you mean boundaries, how are the boundaries like now that it wasn't like before?
Like when I was independent and
Yeah.
moved away. So like I had said, as far as like I could choose what I wanted to do. Now I have to consider what everyone else is doing, or say like my whole family's doing something and I want to be by myself. Now it's hard to create that separation. Where before I was in a different location, um, but now having my alone time is really tough, and I don't want to tell my family that I don't want to spend time with them, but at the same time, all of them are together and they want me to spend time with them. So it's tough to like let them. I feel like I'm letting them down by not spending time with them, but I do need that alone time too, like those boundaries. Um, so yeah, they're a little blurred at the time.
So what I hear you saying is that you don't want to let your family down, and you want to be able to spend time with them, but you also want to have time to yourself, like you did when you were away from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Have you had times where you've been living at home, currently? Um, have you had time where you can have alone time?
When everyone else is gone, I guess is the best time. So when I moved back, I was working from home. So during the day, I'd be by myself. My mom might also be there though, so then that was tough. Like I was working, and she sometimes would be in and out working, but like normally she would just be there. And so because of that, that was hard because she would ask me, "Oh, do you want to do this or this?" And like I want to, but I also have certain responsibilities, and so drawing that line was tough as far as like that situation and boundaries. But yeah, it it just feels like it's something that needs to be like ironed out in a way, and I don't really know how to go about doing that.
When you say ironed out, what do you mean?
Like just making everyone aware um, of like how I'm feeling, but not rocking the boat at the same time.
Have you tried talking to your parents about it? Like, if you're having like a family dinner and you just feel like being alone, have you tried talking to them about that?
Not really, no. I hesitate to just because they are doing so much for me by like by letting me come back home and by providing for me and like the fact we can have family dinners and like all that's really nice. So it's tough to then bring out something that it's tough for me to talk about just because I don't want them to be upset about it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is they do a lot for you and you really appreciate that,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to be like, hey, like I really don't want to be, like I want to be at the family dinner, but I also want to be alone.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is a way that you think that you can think of that you're comfortable with, in talking to your mom, for example, in a scenario where they would like you to come to a family dinner,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to be alone?
Yeah, I think one thing that could help is just like talking about it up front. So instead of saying last minute, like, oh, I need my alone time, I don't want to come to family dinner or to whatever activity it is, instead, like, on the front end, maybe at the beginning of the week, say, like, this is time that I've set aside, like, I'm going to be working on schoolwork or work or whatever it is, but being upfront about that. So rather than coming at it as like an issue, just being proactive and like setting the tone earlier, I think that can help.
So in doing that, how does that make you feel? Being able to tell your parents and really creating those boundaries.
I mean, like just saying it, I feel a little more independent because like it's my schedule, so it's something that like I can really own. And so if I tell them, I think that that independence will be conveyed, and they might just appreciate that, I am setting that boundary because I am an adult, and like, because who knows, maybe they have similar feelings that like we just haven't talked about.
Okay. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel being able to tell your parents about creating boundaries?
I think I'm confident in addressing it in terms of my schedule of like this is what I want to do. I'd say I'm like a 9 or a 10, but coming at it from like I want to talk about boundaries, I think that is a little more difficult for me to have to me in my head, or like how that feels for me is it's a little more like serious and as if there's an issue, and so that like I'm a little apprehensive about that. So maybe that's like a 5.
Okay. So what could make that a higher number?
I guess honestly, just starting the conversation is the tough part because I think a lot of the issue is just my expectations of like what the conversation or how the conversation will go in my head, but it probably won't go like that. It will probably my parents will understand a lot more than what I'm projecting in my head. So I think just actually starting the conversation or like having a talk about that, it's just like jumping,
Yeah.
taking the leap. That's the hardest part, but like that I think is what I need to do to make myself then feel more comfortable in future conversations to talk about boundaries.
So looking at that in the future, being able to create those boundaries, how would you feel in terms of you becoming more independent?
I think it will help a lot. I think having the boundaries, especially like home life and with work and everything, having those boundaries will only be healthier for me and my family, just because we are all adults. So it will help for us to just respect those lines that people have created. And I think that goes both ways too. Like my parents didn't expect to have me move back home during COVID, so like I have to respect that too. Of like they have boundaries that maybe I'm not meeting that, like maybe I'm not taking into account their boundaries too. So I think talking about that will create independence for me, but it also could help them, which I think in the long run will benefit everyone.
So we found one way that you can really start becoming more independent in your home. What are some other ways that you can create those boundaries with them?
And I don't know if this will work, but I've thought about like creating a space for myself, even if it's outside of the home, but like maybe that physical barrier of okay, like when I'm outside of the home and I go to this like a coffee shop or something that like this is my routine. So it's not necessarily having the conversation about boundaries, but like I'm physically creating a boundary. I guess it's an action step I could take to help myself to like feel that independence again, um, rather than like feeling stuck in the house.
So in creating the action plan, you said that by going outside of the house would be helpful. Um, and then you also said beforehand that you would like to talk to your parents, right? So in creating that action plan, do you think by talking to them about having your own space, how would that make you feel in terms of that?
Um, I think it'd be okay because it doesn't impact them too much. Of like, as far as my action plan for doing something outside of the house, it doesn't impact them too much. So I think I'd be much more inclined to have that conversation than a conversation directly impacting them. So as far as like the boundaries that I want to set in the house, like it's their house. So I think I'd be more apprehensive there. But the conversation for outside the house, I definitely think that that could go well.
So when you said that you feel you really don't want to go into something where it will directly impact them, talking about those boundaries. So in terms of starting with really starting to go outside of that space, how would that make you feel in terms of confidence? And then in the future, talking to them directly about setting boundaries.
So I guess like how would I feel having those harder conversations and like talking with them? Right now, a little anxious just because I don't know how it's going to end up, and I don't want to like upset them in any way. But I think ultimately the boundaries, like I know the boundaries are really healthy to have, but just putting them in place, I think it's giving me a little anxiety. I think down the line, once I do have the conversation, though, like we've talked about, I think that that will help future conversations. So my anxiety will decrease each time I have those conversations, just so it'll get easier and easier.
And then when you were living independently, did you have to create boundaries with anyone when you were living with roommates?
In college, yes, I was living with roommates, and then also right after I had one roommate, and that was honestly in college it was difficult the boundaries, but after college, my most recent roommate, like we just did really well living in the same space and like having our own independent lives and like didn't get in the way of each other too much, and so we never really had that issue or conversation. But in college, I definitely had that issue with certain roommates of like they were invading my space and they felt like I was invading their space, and so it was really tough. It was 4 people in an apartment, so like it got really complicated with lots of people and emotions.
What are some ways that you were able to start creating those boundaries in college?
Well, having a conversation, like we did have that conversation about kind of the rules of the apartment and what that would look like. And so that was a good initial first step. But then we stopped really like implementing, I guess, what we had talked about. So then it got tough again. But that having that initial conversation was a big piece of improving the boundaries.
So as we're nearing the end of the session today, I want to thank you for coming in today. And just to make sure that I understood what you were saying, we were really good in terms of creating an action plan for you so that you'll be able to start creating those boundaries. And at the end of the session now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel in terms of starting to create those boundaries?
definitely feel more confident than when I came in, just because we were able to make a plan, so it's not just like in my head wanting the boundaries. So having the plan moving forward, I definitely feel more confident. Um, and I'd say I'm probably at like a 7 or an 8 overall, where like some areas I'm definitely higher, some parts of the action plan even higher. So it was definitely really helpful.
Awesome. So in the next session, we'll go over how we need to create that action plan. That's helped you.
Great, thank you.